Wow. I'm glad I'm here today. Thank you so much. You've always been just a personal inspiration to me, and I'm certain that many people in the room, you've touched many of us, so thank you for all of your work. And my next panelist is Billy Causey, who is the regional director of the Southeast region of the National Marine Sanctuaries program in NOAA. And I worked with Billy 25-ish, a little less maybe, years together. I was a toddler. And I sponsored California's first Fishermen's Forum about 10 years ago when I was directing Save Our Shores in California, and Billy came out to talk about marine protected areas and what he's learned. And so I'm hoping that you will continue to inspire us and work diligently on this whole concept of protecting the ocean. Thanks, Billy.
Thank you, Vicki. But I just can't get out of my mind an image of Jeremy Jackson and Sylvia with weapons in amongst a bunch of illegal fishermen. That image just is incredible. Could we have the lights down, please? I really don't need the lights. I'm happy to be here this morning. It's great. I'm very happy to serve on this panel with some great friends and a great moderator. What I'm going to be talking about, Sylvia, hopefully it's going to be some more good that can come out of a disaster. And what I'm going to be talking about is an initiative that has been started by a number of people, and I'm going to list shortly. It's not a NOAA-driven initiative, although I am here talking about it, but we have been involved in helping put together an agenda for a forum that was recently held. What we're talking about is the beginning of a dialogue, the dialogue being focused on the Gulf of Mexico. And if you don't get anything out of this talk, be sure and remember that website. It'll show up again, but you want to take down that website and try to remember. But back some months ago, right in the midst of when everything was happening, I got a call from Sylvia, and she said, "Billy, what are we going to do to protect the Gulf?" I said, "Well, Sylvia," and she remembered an initiative that we had some years ago, and she mentioned that one. And then I got a call from Kumar Mahadavan, president of Mote Marine Laboratory. And Kumar said, "Billy, what are we going to do to protect the Gulf?" The next day I got a call from Larry McKinney. I was beginning to figure, this is conspiracy. And sure enough, all three of them were asking about what we were going to do. So we started working as a group, and they came together. They pulled together a steering committee, or an executive committee, that started focusing on the Gulf and what we could do in the way of establishing a special area or a network of special areas in the Gulf of Mexico. Whoop, I went too far. It's images like this that are going to be in our minds and our hearts for years to come. And I hope we never forget it. Although these make some people grimace when they see these images, I think it's going to be a part of our dialogue every time we think about the Gulf or every time we talk about it. And I think we need to be sure that we are protecting the Gulf in ways that it can be here for the future. But truly, the Gulf gets a pretty bad rap. It's really not as bad as a lot of people, particularly in Middle America, think. And in fact, if you look at this and you look at the drainage into the Gulf, you look at the things that have happened out there, you think, well, it's pretty bad. But this is the Gulf that I know. This is the Gulf that we know at the Flower Garden Banks National Marine Sanctuary, and it's an area with tremendous diversity. It's an area with beautiful marine life, and it's an incredible live part of the planet. There are commercially and recreationally important species, as well as some of the healthiest corals remaining in the wider Caribbean. But what does the Gulf give us? It looks like I have, I don't know what has happened here in the translation, but anyway, what the Gulf gives us is prosperity in the way of $234 billion a year from shipping, tourism, fishing, all those related activities. It also gives us a sense of community. And over 14 million people call the Gulf home. Over 14 million people use the Gulf, and in fact, are really defined by their passion and love for the Gulf of Mexico. And we saw that during the Deepwater Horizon, and we saw that from the gentlemen that were speaking in Sylvia's film. That was passion. But it also gives us biodiversity. There's over 15,400 species of critters that are documented in the Gulf of Mexico, 1,500 of which are endemic to the Gulf. It's an area with healthy corals, tropical fish. The Flower Garden Banks National Marine Sanctuary is 100 miles due south of the Texas-Louisiana border. And in fact, already there is a network of protected areas, and our colleagues from the Marine Protected Area Center put together this map. And it terrifies some people because they see all this patchwork of protection out there, when in fact it's really varying degrees of protection. Some of it's protecting one species, some of it's protecting gear types. So it's not really what you think of when you think of marine protected areas, but the definition fits these in. And so when people see that, they say, why do you need more areas in the Gulf of Mexico? Well, it's true that they just have not been strategically placed. And in fact, if you look at the National Marine Sanctuary system, we do have a system with 13 National Marine Sanctuaries and 1 Marine National Monument. And we currently have 2 sanctuaries in the Gulf of Mexico, the Flower Garden Banks and the Florida Keys National Marine Sanctuary. Believe me, when I went through this, all these slides were fine, so I'm not going to try to interpret what's going wrong here on the screen. But anyway, the Flower Garden Banks, as I mentioned, 100 miles due south of Texas, Louisiana, and then the Florida Keys National Marine Sanctuary. Both of them serve like bookends in the Gulf. The flower gardens are this area. If you look at this illustration here, you can see right around here are flower gardens east and west, and then Stetson Bank. There are many other pinnacles and ridges in the area that are very significant, very important biological sites. Now, you would think, out in the Gulf of Mexico, how are the corals so healthy? Well, this is just a trend of what's been going on. That graph goes on over to 1977 and comes up to 2010. And you can see that the corals have remained. That's the living coral cover. And in 2010, it actually comes on up here considerably higher. So the corals have remained healthy, and they are protected at Flower Garden Banks. Now, this is an illustration of what surrounds that area. There's around 4,000 oil and gas platforms in the region. We refer to it sometimes as the Iron Archipelago, but you can see all of them here in this area. The Florida Keys National Marine Sanctuary is an area that surrounds a very heavily used coral reef. It's one of the most threatened coral reefs on the planet. There's more use there than any other coral reef on the planet. And it is a multiple use area where commercial, recreational activities go on. So these 2 sanctuaries in our program does in fact provide the kind of the kind of protection that is needed in an area like the Gulf of Mexico, where you have so many activities going on. But those 2 sanctuaries are not isolated. They are connected by current flows, and we know this from the die-off of the long-spine sea urchin in 1983, where within 1 year, 95% of the urchins died in the Gulf of Mexico. Whatever was killing them was being carried by the currents. We now, watch this, you watch the number up there at the top. Those are the years. Now the invasion of the lionfish is showing us the same thing. The area is truly connected, and in fact, it is spreading at an alarming rate around the Gulf of Mexico. And we're already, just this week, they killed 500 lionfish in the Florida Keys in one location, one area. We know by the currents we are connected, but we're not just connected in the Gulf, we're connected to the wider Caribbean. But good things come with those currents. In fact, elkhorn coral has not been found at the flower gardens for 6,000 years, yet we now have 2 new colonies growing out there. The closest place they could come from are along those lines and where those arrows are located. Whale sharks. Well, we know they aggregate off of Hoecevar, Mexico. One that was tagged down there in July ended up in November off of Texas, Louisiana. The bluefin tuna. We know that one tagged female spent all her time doing this and went up right to the footprint of the Deepwater Horizon blowout. There is a series of banks and pinnacles out there. And in fact, if you look at the Gulf, the entire rim, and what I'm talking about are just the waters offshore. We're not talking about the coastal waters. We heard a great panel this morning talking about some of the restoration that's going on there. But we're talking about a form of restoration in the outer waters that could provide conservation and protection for very significant areas. In fact, over 200 ledges and pinnacles in that area. I'm going to stop with this one right here as far as the slide presentation. But I do want to point out that the Beyond the Horizon initiative is the beginning of a dialogue, and I think what happened, we just had a forum, and we brought together a number of people at Mote Marine Laboratory. Mote hosted it, all the primary sponsors, the Hart Research Institute, the University of South Florida, as well as the National Marine Sanctuary Foundation came together, brought in experts, and we had a series of panels with experts starting to present the information, trying to get everyone on the same level of knowledge. And this is something that we did with the Tortugas 2000 process, where we started off laying the information down, and that's why I keep referring to it as the beginning of a dialogue. No decisions were made, there were no plans put together. We had oil and gas representatives there, we had recreational fishing representatives there, commercial fishing, we had a whole variety of different user groups, and we had panels on governance, the economic importance, the biological, ecological significance, and the connectivity in the region. And so the next phase would be going to one more level, and we got a lot of great recommendations. Copy it on that website, because you're going to have to go back to it to see this. I'll tell you, a lot of it's cut out. But you'll see that there's a lot of information. There's a really good white paper, that Beyond the Horizon, that was the cover of the white paper that I started off with, and you'll be able to download that in PDF format and get a lot of information on Beyond the Horizon initiative. Thank you.
And the Colorado Ocean Coalition attended that meeting, and I hosted a panel on vision. So I think there's a lot of excitement in that region, and if you look at our United States watershed, those of us in the middle of the country, it feeds right down in there. So a lot of possibilities for great connections. Greg Stone, who is listed on your agenda, was not able to join us today. And we are very fortunate that John Hoecevar was able to come in, and he is the Oceans Campaign Director for Greenpeace, and he's been working on a very exciting project, which is looking at protecting the deep canyons in the Bering Sea. So John, come join us.
Well, my fellow panelists, you know that I love your work, but you are a tough act to follow, I have to say. So I'm going to talk about two very large canyons in the Bering Sea. Maybe. Bear with me. It's a... I got you. All right. Excellent. So we talk about two very large canyons in the Bering Sea off of Alaska. Zemchug is actually the largest underwater canyon in the world. Pribilof Canyon near the Pribilof Islands. Very, very large as well, a bit smaller. You may know a bit about the Bering Sea from the Deadliest Catch, home to king crab fisheries, also the Alaska pollock fishery, where you get McDonald's fish fillets. It's the fish and much of the fish and chips in the UK. It's still about a quarter of all seafood bought in Germany. Fish, if you eat fish sticks, or if you did growing up like I did, a lot of that is still Alaska pollock. Almost half of all fisheries, almost half of all the fish caught in the United States comes from this area. And this shelf break where you can see the kind of where the light blue turns to dark blue is one of the most productive areas in the oceans. Several groups have been trying to get protections for these areas, starting with the Ocean Conservancy, and then Oceana, and Greenpeace has been in the mix for quite a while. But so far, the North Pacific Fishery Management Council, which oversees this area, it's close to 1 million square miles of ocean, has not chosen to take action. And their most recent answer was, well, you know, we just don't know enough about these areas to justify taking any action. Of course, this is the exact opposite of the precautionary approach that we would like to see taken with fisheries management, but it's kind of typical, unfortunately. So we took this as an invitation, and here you can see, you know, there's actually a fair bit known about these areas, especially compared to other areas of the deep ocean around the world. There had been one NOAA ROV study that covered the upper reaches of Pribilof Canyon. They do regular trawl surveys, and there's observers on many of the boats, so that we were able to get a pretty good sense from the bycatch data that there were deep sea corals and sponges, and these areas were in need of a closer look. So we took this as an invitation to go out and collect more data and see if we can really force the council to do what we saw as their jobs. This is an example of the type of data that was out there so far, and you can see this is Pribilof Canyon. There's some red tree coral, some other types of coral. The observer data doesn't give you a whole lot of detail, and it's not systematic. So from this, you know about as much about where there was a lot of fishing as you do about what the bottom type looks like. And similar for Zemchug, you probably get an idea that that southeast quadrant is worth looking at, but again, it could be just that that's where most of the fishing pressure is. So we went out and we brought our ship, the Esperanza, to the Bering Sea, and we chartered a couple submarines, one-person submarines, and an ROV, and did systematic surveys of these canyons to collect this data and really see what was down there. And of course, industry had been saying all along that, you know, there's nothing down there but mud and silt, and if there was, don't worry, we're not doing anything to it. We would never. So these are some of the, I'm not going to show you a bunch of policy or words. I'm going to get to pictures pretty soon, I promise. This is just to show you where the surveys took place, you know, systematically spread around the canyons. This is Zemchug, and you can see it drops off quite deep. And that's St. George Island, that little green bit up there. So what we found was definitely not just mud and silt. Some of these areas were absolutely beautiful. There's a giant Pacific octopus and sponges and anemones. We found 15 different species of corals, deep sea corals, so the sun doesn't ever penetrate down to these depths. This is the first record of this species in the Bering Sea. It wasn't previously known to live there, and that was the case for many of the things that we saw. Partly it was that no one had ever looked, and it's a reminder of what people have said many times before, that bottom trawling, and especially in the deep sea, it's a bit like blowing up Mars before you even get there. A few of the other types of deep sea corals that we found. This is red tree coral. It's one of the more important habitat forming corals in many areas of the world. And with the paper that we're about to release in the next couple of months, one of the things that we looked at was how important these corals are for providing habitat for fish. And this will not be a surprise to many of you, perhaps any of you, but actually these fish do use these corals as habitat. And particularly in areas like the canyons, where it's not just carpeted with corals, where the corals are more sporadic, they're often the only three-dimensional structure down there. So you can imagine how important they are. And we found, this is, I think, worth noting, we found corals fairly shallow, and shallow meaning 172 meters. This is up in the upper reaches of the canyons. This is, they call it bubblegum coral, Paragorgia. But also, as we moved down the canyons, we were still seeing corals, even 923 meters. It's about as deep as we went. And this is a black coral. And, you know, again, the fish finding these corals as habitat. I don't want to just talk about corals. Sponges are really just as important in many ways as providing habitat for fish and other marine life. And again, they're from the upper reaches of the canyons at 168 meters all the way down to 910 meters. And we basically covered what we were considering to be the fishable depth. So we limited it to close to 1,000 meters. This is a juvenile golden king crab. And according to the NOAA scientist that was on board with us, Bob Stone, these juveniles are only known to use one or maybe two types of sponge as habitat in this part of their life cycle. And it's just another reminder of how little we really understand what's going on down there. We trawl the heck out of these areas, and at some point, maybe we lose the golden king crabs. We really don't know where they went or why. And it's just a reminder of the importance of at least protecting representative portions of these habitats. Many of the sponges that we brought up actually had fish eggs in them. These are snail fish that we had a bunch of eggs in a petri dish, and we're trying to take a picture of the eggs, but they were hatching too quickly, so we ended up just getting baby snailfish instead. And you know, within Magnuson, when we look at U.S. fisheries law, the emphasis is really on essential fish habitat and corals and sponges as important for protecting fish. But you look at this and you can just think about the importance of these areas just for biodiversity as well. And there are at least a half dozen different types of sponge in this shot alone. And you know, not surprisingly, because we know so little about the deep sea, we did discover a new species of sponge while we were there as well. And of course, it's not just about the benthic habitat. These areas are important foraging areas for many types of marine life. This is a pod of killer whales moving through Zemchug Canyon, and we sent this picture to the orca experts at NOAA, and it actually changed what they thought they understood about the population, so they could quickly recognize individuals. Now I'm just wrapping up quickly. This is endangered short-tailed albatross in Zemchug Canyon. Again, no one really knows why they use this area, but they're frequently found there. And we found fishing impacts as far down as we looked. There's trawl net close to 1,000 meters. And this was the worst thing that I saw. This is a couple hundred miles from shore off of Alaska, not exactly a busy hub. And for moving along about 15 minutes in the submarine, we found just destroyed coral, this very large swath. And I'll pretty much stop here, except to say that part of the reason I was happy to have a chance to talk to you is that we'll be working to get the North Pacific Council to protect these areas over the next year and a half or probably more, and we won't be able to do it without your help. Just want to point out Jackie Dragon, who works with me at Greenpeace, and she'll be leading a lot of this work, so if you get a chance to talk to her, please say hello. Thank you very much.
We have a few minutes for Q&A. Any burning questions out there? Go ahead.
Hi, thank you for all of your presentations. My name is Michelle Roberts, and I'm really happy to be with Dr. Earle this morning. Honored speaker in the series. I'd like to know with respect to the website that Marine Laboratory process. Question that I'd like to know is, do you have, thank you, do you have people like the Florida A&M University involved with this, Dr. Richard Clegg? And because one of the issues that, again, I want to keep raising is, especially in the Gulf region, is the justice issue. And in the South, period. And I think it is important that we have folks like the historically black college and universities, the tribal colleges, tribal nations, and small oyster, like the African American Oystermen Association and others, like Byron Oncolade and others. I'd like to know, are they involved in your effort there?
Florida A&M did not participate in this forum, but Dr. Larry Robinson, who was previously there, he's with NOAA now, one of our deputies, did get a briefing on this initiative about 3 weeks before the forum, and he made the same recommendation as that we include them, and they will be brought into the dialogue as well as other universities around the Gulf Coast. As you can see, there's a pretty good number of academics there, but also Dr. Earle was there as her NGO representative, and but we will include them.
Just want to respond in principle to that thoughtful question. When we talk about stakeholders and their representation, when policies are being made and discussions held and whatever it is, when people get together to represent the interests of the ocean, it's true with Camelar as well. There are two big constituencies that you never hear from. I served on the Whaling Commission for 4 years. There wasn't a single whale at the table. It was all people deciding their fate. We have to think for those who are not represented. Who speaks for the fish? Thoreau once asked. Who listens? Who hears the fish when they cry? We need to be their representatives. And if there's a missing piece among humans, then definitely we need to think about them and fill the blanks, get them at the table. But we should never forget that we're speaking for all of life on Earth when we are making these deliberations. The other big category, those who aren't born yet. Those who aren't born yet. Because the decisions we make now will resonate through all future time, now as never before. Because when you think about it, how many tuna are left? We'll either decide there will or there won't be tuna. There will or there won't be swordfish. There will or there won't be sharks, depending on the actions that we take on our watch. So we have to be mindful of that with every time we meet.
One thing I want to add to that is you can go to that website and all the presentations, the entire agenda for the forum is there, and the PowerPoints are going to be associated with each one. And I'd like to point out Tom Raffick back here and April Wakeman, both with the Sport Fishing Conservation Alliance. Tom spoke at the forum, did a fabulous job representing recreational anglers, and we're trying to get all the constituents from all levels engaged. And thank you for bringing up that point.
Thanks for your question. Yeah, that's a great point. In fact, some people are looking at the medicinal potential of several Bering Sea sponges right now. So it's not something that Greenpeace is doing, but it's a good point. And also on that, I just wanted to let people know, especially for the marine scientists in the audience, that the video data from their research will be made available. So if people are interested in doing other types of research on that, we'd be more than happy to work with you.
The gentleman in the back.
I just want to follow up on Andrea's remark. Friday, I was at the New York Academy of Sciences on a conference on marine biotechnology. And the single biggest problem, about 40% of the drugs in clinical trials for cancer, Alzheimer's was another one, cystic fibrosis was another one, are based on sponges and marine species. And those guys were bemoaning the fact they have no supply. 13,000 metric tons to get 30 grams of material that's enough to do actual experiments to develop these drugs that have enormous implication for the world health. And I'm just wondering, are we excluding them inside the protection areas, and are we excluding them, even more importantly, from our number? You know, shouldn't the National Cancer Institute be here, the National Science Foundation be here? Because they're funding a whole lot of things that have to do with the things that we're discussing today.
Well, let's see. With respect to having access to protected areas for research purposes, it seems a logical kind of partnership. When I was chief scientist at NOAA, it's one of the points I made in favor of having marine protected areas for a number of reasons. If you want to have a research project with some security wrapped around it, better put them in marine protected areas where at least there's some chance that the sites that you have invested in, the species you've invested in, will still be there in 10 or 20 or 30 years. You'll have some measure of changes over time and some hope that you'll still have access to that particular kind of organism or that particular kind of ecosystem. I think that selective approach to collecting is reasonable. The unconstrained extraction of wildlife from the sea is not reasonable. The methods that are used, even for science, sending a trawl to the bottom of the sea to sample fish, I think is ridiculous. I think we know better now. It doesn't make any sense to use these indiscriminate means of collecting, but sending an ROV with selective approach, or better yet, a manned system so that you can exactly go there, use the ocean as a laboratory, and look at sponges in place instead of hauling them back to the surface and insisting that they adapt to our circumstances, take ourselves down to where the action really is. I think it's a fundamental case for why we need sanctuaries, so that we can support legitimate research and important health research and benefits that we can derive. But it's not going to work if we keep destroying the source.
One more comment.
Yeah.
Go ahead, Billy.
We have already permitted such activity in the Florida Keys, where in fully protected areas. We always were pondering, you know, what if they find something, they want to come back and get it on a large commercial scale, and then we worry about it.
And you synthesize it.
I'm very disappointed to say our time is up. I think we could all sit here and share more information and talk about the whole concept of protection in oceans. But you have about a 5-minute break. We did go over into our break. And then we have another session starting here at 2:30, which is the BP disaster and the Gulf's recovery. And, oh, with who? Let's see. Who do we have here? Oh, my goodness. Dr. Jane Lutchenko. That's with NOAA, and Thad Allen. That's wonderful. And Don Bosch. Okay. Well, please don't miss that one. That's going to be a wonderful panel. And take a 5-minute break or stay if you like. And thank you for joining us.